Hello and welcome to day 95 of the Not Alone Today chronological Bible reading plan. Today we are in 1 Chronicles chapters 12 through 15 and we are still in the Good News translation for this week.
Chapter 12. David was living in Ziklag, where he had gone to escape from King Saul. There he was joined by many experienced, reliable soldiers, members of the tribe of Benjamin, to which Saul belonged. They could shoot arrows and sling stones, either right-handed or left-handed. They were under the command of Ahiezer and Joash, sons of Shema from Gibeah.
These were the soldiers: Jaziel and Pelet, sons of Azmavet, Beraka and Jehu from Anathoth, Ishmaiah from Gibeon, a famous soldier and one of the leaders of the 30, Jeremiah, Jaaziel, Johanan, and Jozabad from Gederah, Eluzai, Jerimoth, Beliah, Shemariah, and Shephatiah from Arif, Elkanah, Ishia, Azarel, Joza, and Jashobim of the clan of Korah, Jola and Zebadiah, sons of Jeroam from Gedor.
These are the names of the famous experienced soldiers from the tribe of Gad who joined David's troops when he was at the desert fort. They were experts with shields and spears, as fierce-looking as lions and as quick as mountain deer. They were ranked in the following order: Ezer, Obadiah, Eliab, Mishaman, Jeremiah, Attai, Eliel, Johanan, Elzabad, Jeremiah, and Machbanai.
Some of these men from the tribe of Gad were senior officers in command of 1,000 men, and others were junior officers in command of 100. In the first month of 1 year, the time when the Jordan River overflowed its banks, they crossed the river, scattering the people who lived in the valleys, both east and west of the river.
Once, a group of men from the tribes of Benjamin and Judah went out to the fort where David was. David went to meet them and said, "If you are coming as friends to help me, you are welcome here. Join us. But if you intend to betray me to my enemies, even though I have not tried to hurt you, the God of our ancestors will know it and punish you."
God's Spirit took control of one of them, Amasai, who later became the commander of the 30, and he called out, "David, son of Jesse, we are yours. Success to you and those who help you. God is on your side." David welcomed them and made them officers in his army.
Some soldiers from the tribe of Manasseh went over to David's side when he was marching out with the Philistines to fight King Saul. Actually, he did not help the Philistines, for their kings were afraid that he would betray them to his former master Saul, so they sent him back to Ziklag. These are the soldiers from Manasseh who went over to David's side when he was returning: Adnah, Jozabad, Jediel, Michael, Jozabad, Eliu, and Zilethai. In Manasseh, they had all commanded units of 1,000 men. They served David as officers over his troops because they were all outstanding soldiers. Later, they were officers in the Israelite army. Almost every day, new men joined David's forces, so that his army was soon enormous.
When David was at Hebron, many trained soldiers joined his army to help make him king in place of Saul, as the Lord had promised. Their numbers were as follows: Judah, 6,800 well-equipped men armed with shields and spears. Simeon, 7,100 well-trained men. Levi, 4,600 men, followers of Jehoiada, descendants of Aaron, 3,700 men, relatives of Zadok and able young fighter, 22 leading men. Benjamin, Saul's own tribe, 3,000 men. Most of the people of Benjamin had remained loyal to Saul. Ephraim, 20,800 men, famous in their own clans. West Manasseh, 18,000 men chosen to go and make David king. Issachar, 200 leaders, together with the men under their command. These leaders knew what Israel should do and the best time to do it. Zebulun, 50,000 loyal and reliable men ready to fight, trained to use all kinds of weapons. Naphtali, 1,000 leaders, together with 37,000 men armed with shields and spears. Dan, 28,600 trained men. Asher, 40,000 men ready for battle. Tribes east of the Jordan, Reuben, Gad, and East Manasseh, 120,000 men trained to use all kinds of weapons.
All these soldiers, ready for battle, went to Hebron determined to make David king over all Israel. All the rest of the people of Israel were united in the same purpose. They spent 3 days there with David, feasting on the food and drink which their relatives had prepared for them. From as far away as the northern tribes of Issachar, Zebulun, and Naphtali, people came bringing donkeys, camels, mules, and oxen loaded with food, flour, figs, raisins, wine, and olive oil. They also brought cattle and sheep to kill and eat. All this was an expression of the joy that was felt throughout the whole country.
Chapter 13. King David consulted with all the officers in command of units of 1,000 men and units of 100 men. Then he announced to all the people of Israel, "If you give your approval and if it is the will of the Lord our God, let us send messengers to the rest of our people and to the priests and Levites in their towns and tell them to assemble here with us. Then we will go and get God's covenant box, which was ignored while Saul was king." The people were pleased with the suggestion and agreed to it.
So David assembled the people of Israel from all over the country, from the Egyptian border in the south to Amath Pass in the north, in order to bring the covenant box from Kiriath Jearim to Jerusalem. David and the people went to the city of Baalah, that is, to Kiriath Jearim, in the territory of Judah, to get the covenant box of God, which bears the name of the Lord, enthroned above the winged creatures. At Abinadab's house, they brought out the covenant box and put it on a new cart. Uzzah and Ahio guided the cart, while David and all the people danced with all their might to honor God. They sang and played musical instruments, harps, drums, cymbals, and trumpets.
As they came to the threshing place of Kidon, the oxen stumbled, and Uzzah reached out and took hold of the covenant box. At once the Lord became angry with Uzzah and killed him for touching the box. He died there in God's presence, and so that place has been called Perez Uzzah ever since. David was furious because the Lord had punished Uzzah in anger.
Then David was afraid of God and said, "How can I take the covenant box with me now?" So David did not take it with him to Jerusalem. Instead, he left it at the house of a man called Obed-Edom, a native of the city of Gath. It stayed there 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed-Edom's family and everything that belonged to him.
Chapter 14. King Hiram of Tyre sent a trade mission to David. He provided him with cedar logs and with stone masons and carpenters to build a palace. And so David realized that the Lord had established him as king of Israel and was making his kingdom prosperous for the sake of his people.
There in Jerusalem, David married more wives and had more sons and daughters. The following children were born to him in Jerusalem: Shammua, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Helpelet, Noga, Nepheg, Japhia, Elshama, Biliada, and Eliphelet.
When the Philistines heard that David had now been made king over the whole country of Israel, their army went out to capture him. So David marched out to meet them. The Philistines arrived at Rephaim Valley and began plundering. David asked God, "Shall I attack the Philistines? Will you give me the victory?"
The Lord answered, "Yes, attack. I will give you the victory."
So David attacked them at Baal Perazim and defeated them. He said, "God has used me to break through the enemy army like a flood." So that place is called Baal Perazim. When the Philistines fled, they left their idols behind, and David gave orders for them to be burned.
Soon the Philistines returned to the valley and started plundering it again. Once more, David consulted God, who answered, "Don't attack them from here, but go around and get ready to attack them from the other side, near the balsam trees. When you hear the sound of marching in the treetops, then attack, because I'll be marching ahead of you to defeat the Philistine army." David did what God had commanded, so he drove the Philistine back from Gibeon all the way to Gezer. David's fame spread everywhere, and the Lord made every nation afraid of him.
Chapter 15. For his own use, David built houses in David's city. He also prepared a place for God's covenant box and put up a tent for it. Then he said, "Only Levites should carry the covenant box because they are the ones the Lord chose to carry it and to serve him forever." So David summoned all the people of Israel to Jerusalem in order to bring the covenant box to the place he had prepared for it. Next, he sent for the descendants of Aaron and for the Levites. From the Levite clan of Kohath came Uriel, in charge of 120 members of his clan. From the clan of Merari came Asaiah, in charge of 220. From the clan of Gershon, Joel, in charge of 130. From the clan of Elizaphan, Shemaiah, in charge of 200. From the clan of Hebron, Heliel, in charge of 80. And from the clan of Uzziel, Aminadab, in charge of 112.
David called in the priests Zadok and Abiathar and his 6 Levites, Uriel, Asaiah, Joel, Shemaiah, Eliel, and Aminadab. He said to the Levites, "You are the leaders of the Levite clans. Purify yourselves and your fellow Levites, so that you can bring the covenant box of the Lord God of Israel to the place I have prepared for it. Because you were not there to carry the first time, the Lord our God punished us for not worshipping him as we should have done."
Then the priests and the Levites purified themselves in order to move the covenant box of the Lord God of Israel. The Levites carried it on poles on their shoulders, as the Lord had commanded through Moses.
David commanded the leaders of the Levites to assign various Levites to sing and play joyful music on harps and cymbals. From the clans of singers, they chose the following men to play the brass cymbals: Heman, son of Joel, his relative Asaph, son of Berechiah, and Ethan, son of Cushaiah, the clan of Merari. To assist them, they chose the following Levites to play the high-pitched harps: Zechariah, Jaziel, Shemiramoth, Jahiel, Uni, Eliab, Masehiah, and Benaiah.
To play the low-pitched harps, they chose the following Levites: Mattithiah, Elipheleu, Miknehiah, Azaziah, and the temple guards Obed-Edom and Jael.
Because of his skill in music, Chenaniah was chosen to be in charge of the Levitical musicians. Berechiah and Elkanah, along with Obed-Edom and Jehiah, were chosen as guards for the covenant box. The priests, Shebaniah, Joshaphat, Nethanel, Amasai, Zechariah, Benaniah, and Eleazar, were chosen to blow trumpets in front of the covenant box.
So King David, the leaders of Israel, and the military commanders went to the house of Obed-Edom to get the covenant box, and they had a great celebration. They sacrificed 7 bulls and 7 sheep to make sure that God would help the Levites who were carrying the covenant box. David was wearing a robe made of the finest linen, and so were the musicians, Chenaniah their leader, and the Levites who carried the box. David also wore a linen ephod. So all the Israelites accompanied the covenant box up to Jerusalem with shouts of joy, the sound of trumpets, horns, and cymbals, and the music of harps.
As the box was being brought into the city, Michal, Saul's daughter, looked out of the window and saw King David dancing and leaping for joy, and she was disgusted with him. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Today we have read 4 chapters between 1 Chronicles 12 and 15. In chapter 12, we were told of the details of the early followers of David from the tribe of Benjamin, and their names were spelled out. And then later on, we saw followers from the tribe of Gad, and then from the tribes of Benjamin and Judah, then from the tribe of Manasseh. And the chapter ends with a comprehensive list of David's forces from all the tribes of Israel. In chapter 13, we're told of how the covenant box was moved from Kiriath Jearim, the first attempt of bringing it into Jerusalem, David's city, but it ended in a disaster when Uzzah was struck for touching the ark when it almost fell because the oxen stumbled. In chapter 14, we were told of David's activities in Jerusalem and his battle and victory over the Philistines, the same account that we have seen previously in 2 Samuel. And finally, in chapter 15, we saw the detailed account, more comprehensive account than what we saw in 2 Samuel, about the corrections that needed to be made to ensure that the ark of God could be safely transported now from the house of Obed-Edom into David's city in Jerusalem, with a lot of joyful singing and dancing and being carried on poles by the Levites as the Lord commanded Moses. And this time, the mission was a success. Let's go back to chapter 12 and ask, my dear, what stood out to you?
Verse 8 stood out to me. I was quite intrigued with the experts that were really good with shields and spears, and they were fierce looking as lions and quick as mountain deer. It's a virtue that is admirable. Not the fierceness, but the strength of the lion and the quickness of the mountain deer. So when I read that, I just inwardly prayed that I would be like that in my work, to be strong and quick with my attention to details.
Good one. There are just a couple of occasions in that chapter where I noticed that when they gave list of names, some names were mentioned twice. So this whole idea of you'll be in a class and there are two people bearing the same name, that's been around since forever. And I'm wondering how they would have distinguished between them. So for instance, in verses 9 to 13, we're told of this list of the people that joined David's troops from the tribe of Gad. And in that list, there were 2 Jeremiahs. Then, of course, in the list of those who joined him from the tribe of Manasseh, in verse 20, there were 2 Jozabads. And I'm just wondering in my mind how they would have distinguished between them. Jozabad, the one with the tribal mark, and Jozabad, I don't know, I'm just imagining. Or maybe one would be Josie and the other one would be Josbada.
Stop it. These are ancestors that you played with. Stop it.
Okay. But really, the main thing that stood out to me is within verse 23 to 37, because it was lumped together in the Good News translation. I'm not sure exactly what verse it is, about the tribe of Issachar. This was... Oh, okay. This was sandwiched between the list of a comprehensive list of David's forces. So how many people joined him from each of the tribes. And then when it got to Issachar, in fact, looking at the list at a glance, they had the least number of people in terms of the number of people joining David's army from tribes. It was just only 200 leaders. However, it was said of these leaders that they knew what Israel should do and the best time to do it. So talk about discernment and sensitivity. With 200 sensitive leaders, you would make exploits with much more than thousands of valiant men that are doing, quote and unquote, the right things at the wrong times. But it makes a lot of difference. When you wonder the secrets behind David's successes, I think it's not just only in terms of the bravery of the men, but also in terms of strategy and more often than not, just divine alignment. And when you have people like the men of Issachar, which had now become more or less a brand, people talk of being like the men of Issachar who understood the times and what Israel ought to do per time. We need to be those kind of people that are always in tune with God and knowing what we should be doing and what the visions or the communities we are part of should be doing, at least to the extent to which we have influences in those circles.
And just one last point that stood out to me, 38 to 40, on how that the relatives of this army brought food for them, brought lots of food, and it was an expression of joy.
Yeah.
It ties in with what I understand in my culture in Yoruba people, there's something called ajoshe. It means doing things together. In that one person would have an event and you find several of their family members or even friends hiring their own canopy, hiring their own caterer of the same event, just to support that person, to make sure that the person knows that we are here, we are fully supportive of you. When I was growing up and my mom does that, I would be like, why don't you just go as a guest? Why do you have to hire your own canopy, cook for your own guests? Even she would even do souvenir that our own guests would take home from a party that your friend is doing. And she kept trying to help me understand that is what they do in Yoruba land. But I just kept thinking maybe she was doing too much. But then I got to Liverpool and my church women do the same thing. And then it dawned on me like, oh, this is it. In my church, for example, one person will be doing something. About 5 to 6 will gather around to help the person. So much that when you get to the party, you wouldn't even know who is doing what. It's like a collective support. And I'm just raising it out to say, firstly, to appreciate what our women do and that we should appreciate our culture. It might be different for another culture. It might be another culture might be, if you're the one doing the party, you make
provision.
You make provisions for your guests, and that's also correct. But I'm just saying that sometimes when we don't understand the nuances of our culture because we're still in it, we shouldn't despise it. Because when we then go out of it, we get to appreciate the exact thing that we've been learning. And somehow, even in our not understanding that culture, we find that same culture is imbibed in us. We find ourselves growing up and also wanting to contribute to every single thing that we see or do. It's just very beautiful.
That's a good point. Chapter 13, what stood out to me is verse 12 and verse 14. Verse 12 says, "Then David was afraid of God and said, 'How can I take the covenant box with me now?'" It's just strange that, one moment they were all rejoicing and celebrating and all that. And then the response of David after Uzzah was struck dead was, it says in verse 11, the last part, David was furious because the Lord had punished Uzzah in anger. And I'm wondering what made joy turn to fury in just that split seconds. Of course, we know what happened. Uzzah died. And some would even say, why should that have happened? But of course, when we get to chapter 15 and saw the list of things that they got wrong in doing this, and that's kind of the central message here, actually, that, while it's okay to want to do good things, we want to be sure we are doing things that we are doing in alignment with how God intends for them to be done. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about us or our good ideas. It's about God's name being made famous and God receiving the glory. And if he has spelled out how some instructions should be carried out and we are disregarding that, in this case, probably just out of ignorance, because apparently nobody has paid attention to the covenant box, and we keep calling it the covenant box because that's what the Good News translation calls it, but this is the Ark of Covenant. And it's been totally ignored in the days of Saul because he's busy fighting David and looking for him all over the place. But now, for that same reason, this disaster happened. But I love verse 14 when he says he stayed there 3 months in the house of Obed-Edom, and of course God blessed Obed-Edom's family and everything that belonged to him. So the problem is not with the covenant box. The problem is in the way it was brought. And again, when David heard that actually the person, I don't know the story behind dumping it in Obed-Edom's family. And I'm not even sure if Obed-Edom was thoroughly Jewish, because they said he's a native city or a native of the city of Gath. And we know Gath is part of the territory of the Philistines. And so I don't know his story, but for whatever reason, the Ark of Covenant was put in his house. And in 3 months, everything turned around for Obed-Edom. So much so that as we go on in the narrative, we started seeing many other people named Obed-Edom. And I'm wondering, how many Obed-Edoms are there? Is it the same Obed-Edom that, was in the house, that was also listed as part of the choir and was also listed as part of the people leading the procession and things like that.
Sure.
But yeah, it's just striking to see that when we allow God's presence, which is what the Ark of God symbolizes, there is blessing just by virtue of the presence of God. Psalm 16 puts it beautifully, I think verse 11. In the presence of the Lord, there is fullness of joy, and on his right hand, pleasures forevermore. What stood out to you?
The part I found more interesting is how they dance with all their might to honor God. In my Sunday school class that I teach, whenever we were about to dance, this is what I used to tell them, like, let us dance with abandon, like David did. And half of them be looking at me like, huh? And I'll say, oh, when David danced, he danced with all his might. And they say, look on their face. And I say, just dance because you're grateful to God. So every time I read about how that they dance with all their might, like, it reminds me that we don't give thanks after the victory is won. We give thanks for the victory that is about to be won. Just because he is there, he has made us his dwelling place, his Zion. That is enough to throw all caution to the wind and just strut and dance, do all the robotic styles you can do to give him the glory. Play a song. It dispels sadness. It dispels sighs, and it lifts your spirit up. I was listening to Chuck Swindoll I think yesterday, and he was saying how that one man got healed of a terminal disease because for 10 minutes of his day, he would listen to something that would make him laugh. Just a deep belly laughter. And the guy did it consistently. Went back to the hospital. And the terminal, what they called terminal, was now somehow curable. And then it became after some years, it became part of the medical people within that organization. And it just shows that simple things in life can help us, can tune out those doubts and lies that the devil is bringing to us and give us better perspective into the workings of God. So as much as we can, let's dance, sing at the top of our voice if we can, and just dance, shake that stiff body to God, to give him the glory, to honor him.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. Chapter 14, verse 2, it says, and so David realized that the Lord had established him as king of Israel and was making his kingdom prosperous for the sake of his people. And that phrase, for the sake of his people, stood out to me in the sense that the prosperity that God was bringing upon David's kingdom, in other words, the nation of Israel, he realized very quickly that the purpose was not just for his own sake of fame, but the prosperity ultimately is for the sake of the people of God. And that must be a mindset that leaders should have. It's never all about them. It's about the team. It's about the people. It's about the followers at the end of the day. And we must take that into consideration in our leadership. It's also striking that in verse 4 to 7, where we were given the list of children supposedly born to David in Jerusalem, actually the first few names there were born to him in Hebron. And I think it's just those in verse 6 that would have been born to him in Jerusalem. But because in the account in the Chronicles, they were silent about the fact that there was, first of all, some 7 years of battle between the kingdom of Judah and the rest of the tribes that made up Israel. Before, Ishbosheth was killed and David became the king. They didn't want to dwell on that part of history for these people that are just returning from exile. There is no point, lingering on that. They just want to rally around the story from David forward. We've given the chronology of Saul. We've mentioned the fact that he was killed and buried. Let's move on to David straight away and then dwell on David. And that's what the rest of First Chronicles really will be about. So I just find that slight discrepancy worth highlighting in that sense.
Yeah.
Did anything stand out to you in chapter 14?
Yes, verse 15 stood out to me.
Yeah.
In that God said he'll be marching ahead of David to defeat the Philistine army. We've often heard prayers like this, that God will go ahead of you, God will go ahead of you. This is a good example that it does happen. It does go ahead of us to defeat the enemy. And it brings to light that Bible verse that says that we are more than conquerors. So apart from the victory, we are even more than victors. So therefore, we wouldn't sit and accept any form of victimization that the devil is bringing to our mind. We are not victims, we are victors, because he has gone ahead of us to defeat the enemies.
Indeed. Thank you. And finally, in chapter 15, I just love the details of, all the things that they now had to do right for the Ark of Covenant to be successfully moved to David's city. Not only were Levites instructed to be the ones to carry, it also says in verse 12 that they should purify themselves so that they can do the work properly. In verse 15, that they carried it on poles as God commanded through Moses. So that phrase, as the Lord commanded Moses, which we saw many, many times in the Pentateuch, we're beginning to see it again and again in this short chapter to show that indeed, when we do things the way God instructs, the reward is always joy and bliss and victory, as was the case in this story.
Yes.
Anything stood out to you?
The part I found really, really interesting was the arrangement of the music and the instruments.
Okay.
I'm sure some people will think I'm naive. I'm naive about certain things. I found it so intriguing that musical arrangement is in the Bible. So when they just brought to mind when I was in the choir, and they would say auto, this, that, and it's there. So all these structures and hierarchy that we've heard of in church, that some of us are so vehement about, that why would they choose this person and not that person? It has to be, because we literally saw in this chapter how that certain people were selected to play the high-pitched harp. Certain ones were selected to play the low-pitched one. The one that was skilled in music was made to be in charge of the Levitical musicians. The structures are not put there to defeat us. They are put there to make us work as a team. So whether you're the one passing the leaflets or you're the one leading the song, we're still working together to his glory and for his honor. So it's just like a charge to us to not despise these things. It's a charge to just say we shouldn't rage against structure. Structures are necessary to put things in place. We might not like it, and most times we often don't like it because we are not the ones calling the shots. When it gets to us being the leaders and we are the one calling the shot, it's so righteous and so justified. But when we find another person calling the shots and we are not in the atmosphere of the leading people or something, we get to say, oh no, it's not fair. They didn't let this person sing praise and worship. They didn't let this person do prayers. But is that what we're in church for? If our purpose is to serve and worship him, it then makes all these workings of the structure, it makes it pale. Because the core vividness of why we're there is God and what He has led us to do in that particular service. So yeah, just to say, let's take it easy with our leaders. They have their reasons for making things happen. If we find that the reasons are so not fair, is to pray and find a safe way to raise it with them, and not to raise it with them in a dishonoring way that even put us farther away from having their ears or wanting to make any changes.
Indeed. Yeah, and that brings us to the end of 1 Chronicles 15, chapters 12 to 15. We flip the page on day 96 and we'll land in the book of Psalms to consider 9 Psalms at a stretch, and I look forward to that. But till then, just remember,
you're not alone
today.
God bless you.